Boom, boom.
Welcome to The Artist Path. I am your host, Flynn Heathcliff, and today I'm here with a very special friend and creative partner. Shout out to Holly. What's up, Holly?
Hi, Flynn.
It's
How's it
been too
going?
long.
I know. It's been like a few, like a month or two at this point.
Has it?
Yeah, I think so. It's just been crazy, like, madness over here. So I've been out of my creative zone for a minute.
No.
I know. Life, man. Life happens and it's crazy. But we're getting back in a good place. And so now I have all of these ideas that I get to actually execute. So it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, you made a good point. I think sometimes real life can get in the way of creativity. And if you don't find a way to be disciplined about it, then your creativity can really hit the back burner. And for someone like me personally, I can't allow that to happen because I always feel like when creativity takes a back seat, I feel like I'm dying. I know that's
Sure.
serious, but I feel like I'm dying.
Absolutely. Yeah. Consistency is huge. It's major. And I've also over the years, because I've been doing this for a really long time, have just had these like moments where just like everything got put on the back burner and then I just like you slowly become more and more unhappy and like discontent and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I have not been creative in a while. Let me get back to that. And then I'm back on board and and get a bunch of stuff out. And then I've learned that, what, life is always going to happen and crazy things are always going to get, kind of in the way, but then you could kind of utilize them and turn those, like, use those things to fuel what you're doing. So then you don't really ever have to put the creativity down. You get these unexpected curveballs that just kind of help fuel what you're doing.
Do you feel like it's easy to ease back into your creativity after taking a break, or do you feel like it's one of those things where it's kind of difficult, you got to really work yourself into it and then it becomes easy?
Oh no, it just like explodes out of me. There's no, for me it's like, especially like the long the long runs of like having to be more practical or focus on, like my responsibilities and stuff at home or whatever. It's like then all of a sudden it's just like it's bursting out of me and I cannot stop it from coming out. So it's just like my poor husband, he just gets it at this point. Like he just knows that if I'm sorry, the house is a mess because I have all of my lighting gear and all of my camera stuff and all of my props, and like when I'm doing out, he just has to just like walk through it and just let it happen, because there's no stopping me once I really just explode.
Just gotta accept it.
It's just that's the kind of cool thing about it is, that's just always been me, like, throughout the years when I was younger and just growing up, and even at this point, it's just like I can't stop. It just doesn't, even if I try. So no, it's more of like it just happens. There's no like having to ease or like try to find it again after a long slow point or slow time period. It's just like it just explodes.
I don't know if I can relate to that. I'm trying to think. I think for me it's one of those things to where it's really a part of who I am. So there's, even when it's taking a back seat, it's because I think it's taking a back seat, but in all reality, it's always there, just in very subtle ways. Like maybe it's I'm taking a creative way to work, like I'm not taking the typical way, and I'm seeing things that inspire me on my way there. Now it's not an active process, like I'm not actively creating something, but I still feel like I'm engaging with the creative process because I'm being inspired.
Absolutely. That's great. That's awesome. That's something that I always wish I had. Like for me, it's these bursts or whatever, but like always being able to have it on your mind is like it's kind of like a practice for some
Mm.
people, and so it's really great that you are able to just like always be thinking about it.
So we, like I mentioned, we are creative partners.
Mhm.
We worked on a project over the summer, which it's still summer, is it? I mean,
I mean, yeah, until the 21st of September, right? If you want to get technical.
right. If you want to get technical, by the time this drops, which could be next month, October, um, it would have been like a few months. We worked on the birth of, which was very liberating for me, and it was a very wonderful experience. Um, that's vague language. I think it was very. I had blood on my face. I'll just say that, and you were too excited for me to have all that blood on my face.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that legitly freaked me the hell out. But the pictures came out great. I say all that to say the pictures came out great. The videos came out great. Um, for the people who don't know, Holly, what what do you do creatively?
So I am for the most part, a photographer.
Mm-hmm.
That is just my kind of my go-to. I've been shooting since like middle school. My dad was a photographer, hobbyist, but he always gave me his hand-me-down cameras. So yes, that is my weapon of choice, I guess. But yes, I try to get creative in other ways. Photography is my number one.
Mm. So, what are some of your favorite things to shoot?
I think that it changes, but mostly people. I love to shoot people. I'm trying to get into landscape and like more micro photography, but people is I'm just so intrigued by people. I think that that's just my favorite thing to play with.
What about people?
Really, it changes so much. It's, for a while it was shooting families, and it was just being the energy of like kids and chasing them around the park or their favorite places and stuff. That was when I was back in Chicago. I also was shooting bands live, and that was like, my thrill for a few years. I grew up with a bunch of musicians, so it was really easy for me to be around it. Right now I'm trying to become more artistic in the sense that I'm learning. I've kind of leveled up on kind of getting a deeper dive into like the history of art and everything. So I'm trying to become more creative and more purposeful with shooting people in more creative atmospheres that I'm trying to put together. So it's just like the thrill of that has been really cool. But yeah, it just depends. I also just love doing candid or lifestyle because I think that some people are just so interesting that they kind of speak for themselves, and just being able to document them and what they do and what they're passionate about there's just something very there's a lot of strength in that. I don't know. I get a lot of like moving images from that.
I like that. I like your answer. It actually reminds me of I went to an art show a while ago, and there was this painter who painted portraits of people, and I went and talked to him, and he told me that some of the paintings that he painted of real people, they were of what he saw when he looked at them, and not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily how they looked. And I thought that was so interesting, how you can look at someone and see something, and they may not even see it within themselves, but you see it.
Yes.
And I guess it's a creative thing, but I guess it's like a psychological, almost spiritual thing.
Oh, for sure.
And I love that with photography, is that you can really take someone out of their comfort zone, or take an aspect of them and hold a microscope up to it, and you just see it. It's so big, it's so profound. I thought that was interesting, and I know in the project that we did together, the birth of, I felt like I took a small aspect of myself that I didn't know anything about, and you captured it perfectly. And I was shocked. I'm still shocked. I feel like everybody who I show the pictures to are shocked. Namely the the night photos, the ones with the blood on them. I feel like people don't necessarily know how to react to that, and that's because they haven't seen me in that light. But they've seen me, giddy and happy and even in a suit before. So those pictures people were happy to see and used to seeing, but the pictures with the blood on it, even my mom was like, "Oh, I don't want to look at this." I was like, "It's
Yeah.
me. Love me for me."
Just show her the behind the scenes videos and us laughing and you asking if it looks like barbecue sauce on your face.
Oh, you remember
And
that?
yeah. And then it kind of breaks the tension. But those are very, even so in the moment, also, I just want to add this really quick, not to cut you off, but like even in the moment, I was so excited because I love, yeah, pushing people outside of their comfort zone and getting really creative with things. And sometimes all it takes is like bringing in fake blood to get a really strong message into the image. And I remember just being so excited in the moment. And, oh, this is so awesome. And I just love that he was so into this. And it wasn't even my idea. And I get to shoot this. It was so cool. And then it came time to edit them. And I was like, oh my God, these are so intense. Oh my, like, I don't like to see him like this. Like, it was giving me a very emotional response. The one that I didn't have while we were shooting. And it was like, and in our time right now, it was also kind of sparking just like this kind of sincere, it sparked a lot of emotion. So it was very intense, and it is very intense to see like somebody who or somebody who like you care about covered in blood. Like I kind of forget while we're shooting, like, oh wait, okay, these images are gonna be intense. It's just, but yeah. So I get what your friends and your family are saying for sure.
I see. I wish you would have told me you had an emotional response to editing them, because when you were actually shooting, you were all so fucking happy. I was like, yo, because I honestly felt like I was losing my mind a little bit. I don't know what it was, but as soon as I put the blood on my face, I just felt like I was a different person.
Mm-hmm.
And you made a good point about getting people out of their comfort zones, because for me, as much as I wanted to do that, as much as I wanted to go for that, it still felt like it was outside of my comfort zone. But I felt like you did a really, really good job of working with it and putting me at ease. And I think no matter what, when you're shooting with someone, when you're the photographer and you're shooting with a model who can be experienced or maybe not so experienced, comfort is important. Even when you want to put somebody outside of their comfort, I still feel like you have to have some type of chemistry and create a safe place for both of you in order for you to really embrace being outside of your comfort zone. So how important would you say chemistry is between a photographer and their subject, the model?
I mean, you're absolutely right. It's like I could have very easily, and I was trying very hard not to like take you out of the emotion that you were trying to portray for that scene. Again, that was like, that project was your baby. So it was like, I know it was not helpful being like, oh my God, this is so fun, and you're like trying to be this, in this moment. So it can absolutely alter, like what I'm doing with you, or our chemistry or our relationship to the project can absolutely affect the outcome. I think that to answer your question, it's huge. It's I think that if you, so I've had some friends where I've been shooting over the years, and I find that sometimes it's very difficult for us to get the outcome that I'm looking for. And a lot of the time it has to do with me. I think that sometimes like pushing people outside of their comfort zone, they need a different me to get them there. And so if
Mm.
I just go in and I'm like, oh, okay, this is gonna be so much fun, I'm so excited, I have this great idea, and then we get into it and like they're not feeling it, it's not clicking the way that I'm trying to get it to click. And so if I have a hard time getting them there, that's on me, right? And that's something that I'm still learning all the time, because it's different for everybody too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like what can get you there would be different than what would get, you know, my other friend there. It could be the same exact shoot, the same exact concept, but everybody needs a little something different to get them there, you know? And so I think that the subject has to do a little homework, as well as I have to do a little homework on trying out different things. Like I can't expect to just tell them to get there and they'll be able to do it. You know, not everybody, some people you can, right? Like I've worked with people who get there before I even open my mouth and I'm like, perfect, this is going to be great. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like this, I don't have to work very hard on this. But then there's, you know, as you were saying earlier, it's like, if you're shooting somebody and they're not comfortable with themselves, or they're in a situation that they're not used to being in, you like, I could see them as beautiful, I could see these images as beautiful, and then they could be like, oh my god, I hate this image of myself, you know. So it's like, it's difficult on that aspect too. You know, it's like there's a lot of prep, I think, that you and I did for this, we did some art boards and everything, and you kind of like, we did the prep, and I think that is the important part, is having the conversation before and like actually planning it out before when you're doing something like this. Otherwise it's really hard to just like say, hey, I have this idea for a shoot, you know, can you come over and let's try to execute it, if I don't give you any of the backstory or any of the ideas beforehand, or any like maybe visual references beforehand. It's going to be a really difficult night. Right. So I think a lot of it has to do with preparation.
That's a very important part that I think I may have overlooked. In retrospect, I can see that clearly, that it was the preparation. Because even on my part, I threw the blood on my face before, so I knew how it would look on me. I knew the texture I was going with. I knew the energy of the shoot.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I knew what it was. And I knew my story and why I wanted to tell this story. So preparation does have a big hand in the overall execution.
Yes.
Specifically speaking, though, what are some of the ways that you put your subject at ease besides preparation?
Communication is just talking to them, I think, is a big thing. And there was a point in time where even with like specific people that I do know, not even like strangers or like people who I just met, like I was really quiet when I would shoot. I would just shoot whatever happened. It was like more of a lifestyle thing, but I wasn't really directing. And I got great images, but it made for a very awkward photo shoot. And I'm sure it wasn't very fun for them, because I'm just, you know, they don't know if I'm getting anything good or whatever. So I had to really, I mean, like I learned how I like read books on directing and how to actually communicate with people, which is not even just like, how does a photographer communicate with their subjects or anything. It was like just how to communicate with people in general, you know, and just going down that rabbit hole of like just personal growth, I think helped out a lot, because communication is like a huge thing. You know, if you're not telling them, oh my gosh, you know, like you look so beautiful this way or whatever, you know, or let's try to, you know, I know it feels uncomfortable, but I promise it looks good. And you have to show them the images too, because you have to build this kind of trust with who you're shooting. Otherwise they feel so outside of what you're doing, if that makes sense. So in just like, you know, and you learn this in the film industry too, that when you start working with like, you know, larger named actors or whatever, like you're not bothering them if you go up, introduce yourself, tell them what you're there for, stop at a good moment, show them some of the images that you took, you know, after you take them. then you're building that trust with them. Then you're going to get a lot better images. Like, it's just, once everybody feels good around each other and comfortable around each other, and figuring out what that means to who you're shooting, because it is different for everybody, that's when you get the good stuff.
Sheesh, that's a really good point. I think you made a really, really good point about the self-development aspect of it, because sometimes you do have to look within yourself and change who you are in order for the other person to change, or the other person to feel at ease, and then overall the whole circumstance changes. I think, well, I know I've had to change my approach as well in a very similar aspect, change the way that I've communicated, being more open, being more, I think for me, it's the awkwardness. Like, you can almost, sometimes you can cut the awkwardness and the tension with a knife.
Sure.
In some of my old shoots, especially when I'm shooting with people I don't know. And now one of my priorities, one of my biggest works when I do a shoot, is put people at ease first. And sometimes for me, even before we start shooting, I'll just tell them, we're gonna have fun. The most important thing here is we're gonna have fun. We're gonna take some good photos, but we're also most importantly, when you leave today, you're gonna have had a great time. And I kind of pride myself on that. And I feel like once I do that and I get into that mindset, and they're in that mindset as well, it puts people at ease naturally. And they're more open to being themselves. They're more open to laughing at themselves or laughing at me. And sometimes, I'll make myself look awkward and stuff just so they know it's okay as well. I think that communication and building that rapport is one of the most important works. I know a lot of people want to get into photography and they think about the camera, or they think about putting together the shoot as far as like the aesthetic and props and stuff. But I think one of the most low-key factors in coming up with great photos is the rapport between the model and the photographer.
Absolutely. Have you run into anybody yet who's like, no, I want this to be a serious thing?
No, that's not the type of people I work with.
Well, yeah, because not everybody's like there to have fun, right? Like sometimes it's like, oh no, like I need business headshots or something, and they're like more serious. And have you run into anybody like that yet?
I've run into people who are more direct. I'll say that.
Sure.
I think for me, if it's not fun, I just can't do it, because part of my creative process is enjoying the work that I do. And if I don't enjoy it, then it's not creative to me. It's just a task.
Absolutely.
And I can do tasks, especially if I'm getting paid, but you're not going to get all of me. You're not going to get the innovation. You're not going to get the impulses that I would normally get if I was under, I guess, what's the word? Why is it slipping me? Why is it slipping me now? Any other time? When I'm under the right conditions, I work better.
Sure.
And having to do a task is just, out of obligation, I don't work my best.
Absolutely.
I just don't. My question for you is, because we're talking about the rapport between model and photographer and how that equals great photos. First off, I gotta know, from your perspective, what makes a great photo?
Ooh, that's a very difficult question to answer, because it's so many different things. I think that, like, for me at least, it's just it could be, oh my gosh.
I got her.
Yeah, this is like that question, like, what's your favorite song? If you had to pick one song ever that you've heard in your entire life, like, what is that one thing that made it good? It's like, I can't even choose one song, so I don't even know how to answer this. There's so many. Okay, photography is like this really cool thing, right? It's just like film, or it just like it can take you out of where you're at and what you're doing, and just kind of like it can transcend you to another place. And I think those are like images that do that just like take you out of your moment could be so freaking cool. But then there's also, I've always been a lover of like, okay, so I'm a big nerd about like old Universal Hollywood monster movies.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like there's all these behind the scenes photos of like, you know, like Frankenstein in his makeup chair drinking a cup of tea. And I think that that is just like the coolest thing ever. I can't tell you why. I just think it's like such a cool image of the time. And I think that there's just something that sparks like this creativity, you know, bug in me when I see those behind the scenes images. And I think it has to do with just like documenting time and just seeing another time and like how they used to do things that I love, which at, you know, is film at that, you know, in that aspect is just like, you know, you see this monster in the movies and then you see him drinking a cup of tea behind the scenes. It's just like there's just something so fun about that to me. I just love it. You know, so it just depends. There's it could really be anything, you know. I don't think that there's one specific thing that makes a photograph awesome. So I'm not sure how to answer that. I'm sorry.
Do you feel like, and maybe I'll rephrase the question, it might help. Are there any common qualities that exist between what you would say are great photos, like something that all great photos have? Maybe it's a sense of timelessness or the way it captures emotion.
There's nothing specific because there are so many different ways to do that, and that's why I love photography and film, is because there are so many different ways you could do it. And so if you see the same way over and over and over again, and it like it kind of loses its effect, and then you get this new photographer doing like evoking these emotions in a new way with a different composition or a different, you know, way of lighting it, or a different, you know, way of coloring the image, you know, to evoke this same emotion just in a new way. And I think there's just something great about that, you know. It's just kind of this ever evolving thing. And there's not one specific thing to help inspire, I guess. It's just, yeah, it's just like this thing that will never end. I don't know. I just, you know, like it's like composition is a really great thing, and it could get like some really cool what's the word? Now I'm losing words.
It's contagious.
It could evoke like a really cool emotion in people, just like seeing a really beautiful composition in an image. But you can also see an image with just like where somebody just threw all composition out the window, and it could still evoke like this really cool response from the viewers. And it's just like, there's, again, it's just like my favorite thing that there's not like a specific thing you can learn. I mean, you can level up. Like a person who has never taken a photograph could pick up a camera and take a really great photograph without knowing any of the basics, any of the fundamentals, any of the history, any, you know. But then you kind of, at that point, like if that person wants to level up, okay, well then they're going to start learning the fundamentals. So they're going to be like, okay, well, what makes a great composition, right? You know. And then it's like, okay, well, at that point, where did these things come from? You know, where did this start? Where did this where did the style start, right? And why? And when was it used? So you kind of just keep leveling up in that way, and you kind of build this knowledge of, and then you build control over what you're shooting. So it's, you know, and then what you do and your perspective of these fundamentals and these elements of design and everything is like what is going to inspire others to do it in their way.
Oof, you put that perfectly.
I think I kind of went off on a tangent there. Nah. That didn't really answer your question, but
no, but I think you put that perfectly, because I felt like you were almost talking about me, because I just picked up a camera. I didn't learn anything beforehand. and I would take some pretty cool photos, but I didn't know why or how I did it. It was just like a spur of the moment. And with that comes inconsistency. You
Mm-hmm.
have the lightning in the bottle or you don't. And I wanted to better my craft. So I did learn some basics. I taught myself a lot, but there were some things that I would research, or just small things like very, very basic things like how can I take better photos in the sunlight? And I just type that in Google and see what would come up. Or
Mm-hmm.
how can I take more, I guess, emotionally provoking images or just better quality images? And some of those rules or guidelines, I want to say rules, but guidelines have really helped me. And now I'm seeing that there's people around me who are inspired by my work and they want to get into it. And my advice to them is always it's always the same advice. It's just shoot and pay attention. Like
Yeah.
shoot and pay attention, because that's how I learned. I shot, I looked at an image, and I questioned if I like this image or not. Why do I like it? Why do I not like it? I compare it to other images that I've taken, and but it was always with me, like I wouldn't take my work and say I want my work to be like this person's work. I want my work to. It was always competition with myself and always
Sure.
comparison with myself, and I think that ultimately helped me to better my craft. And one of the main things that helped me without realizing it was the power of imagination.
Yes.
Because photography, looking down a camera is it's really your eyes, it's what you see. So in a way, your imagination is what you see, even if it's not in the physical, even if it's not reality, you can imagine something and still see it. And as I've played with my imagination, it's enabled me to get better quality images. It's enabled me to really visualize the shoot before I do the shoot, which is pre-planning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just helped me overall, in all creative aspects of my life, but namely photography. How important would you say imagination is when it comes to photography?
Oh my gosh, it's to me personally, like that is what I mean, that's the lifeline of what I'm trying to do. It doesn't always come out that way. But what I have going up in my head and like what these images that I take mean to me, like it's always about how I got there from my imagination. Like that's just how I was raised as a person from my father, and he was like he wanted to be a Disney animator, so imagination was like our our building blocks to life. So it was just like everything that we did and everything that we looked at and everything that we watched or whatever was like, oh, imagination, and like what can you imagine and how, it was just like that's just like I don't know any other way to create an image. But I'm sure there are others out there who don't necessarily look, like consider imagination.
Mm-hmm.
But it just personally, even if it doesn't come out as like imaginative, that is just always, I mean, that's just like that's where I start.
So it's always part of the process.
Always it's like, and I am a daydreamer, so I just like I'm sitting here, I'm like daydreaming, like because I can't, especially right now, like what's going on in my personal life is just there's just so much going on that I can't get to my camera right now, and so all I'm doing is like imagining, and using my imagination to create these concepts that I can't even always get down on paper because I'm either driving or like I'm just always kind of like what you were saying earlier, I'm always thinking about it. There's always things that I'm imagining up, and and it's always outside of my realm of expertise as far as execution. But I know that one day I'm going to have this like amazing group of creatives that I'm actually going to be able to execute like one of these ideas, like from beginning to the end and get an end result. I know that's going to happen one day, but it's like, I mean, that to me is what can set you apart from an image of I don't know how to explain this without, like you don't need it, but I have it. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how else to explain it. It's like not everybody needs an imagination to take a very cool photograph. But to me, it's like starting with your imagination takes you outside of what's already been done and giving you something to create that can blow the minds of other creatives. Essentially, because they're the ones that kind of know what you put into it if you put a lot into it. You know what I mean? I'm having troubles explaining this one.
It's contagious. I told you it's contagious.
Yes. What the heck? Yeah, it's imagination takes you to a place, it's what, like Disney. And I know a lot of people either hate Disney or love Disney, but
right.
I don't think about the business. I know people hate the business side of Disney. But the actual imagination aspect, the Imagineers that are behind Disney are like what has always inspired me to just take it to that next level, push myself out of my comfort zone and create, right? It's like you are your own limit. Why not take a photograph that you think, like you imagine up in your, you dream up in your head. If it's just
You're gonna have the words later. Just
I'm gonna think about this, and we're gonna have to have a whole podcast just on imagination, okay? Because I'm gonna have so much to say once it all just like kind of settles in my brain, because I have way too much to say about it.
Yeah, imagination is one of those. I can't do it justice with just one question, honestly.
Yeah, like if you had to answer that question, how would you answer it?
Yikes.
Right? Can we have a whole podcast just on imagination alone? I'm writing this down right now so we can do this.
I feel like how important is using your imagination when it comes to photography. I think you made a really good point about it being the lifeline. For me, there is no photography without imagination, because the images show up in my imagination, and it's the ideas, and it's I feel like society's kind of weird. They push you to not imagine and not daydream, but they also cheer the innovators and the inventors, and you don't get the innovation and inventing without daydreaming. Mm-hmm. So, you don't get that without imaginations. And I don't get any images in photography or even video or any creative thing without my ideas, which comes from my imagination. To me, they're synonymous.
Yeah.
And I just put it in simple words, but it's really more profound and more deep than that. I just feel like we as in people, everybody, society, school specifically, should encourage students, whether they're artists or not, to use their imagination more, because imagination is the place where a lot of our solutions lie. And if we're just trying to find our solutions in the normal everyday workings of life, we're always going to fall flat to a degree, because a lot of our solutions lie beyond the day-to-day rational mind.
Yes, exactly. 100%. And there would be no photography without people who were just so photography started, it had nothing to do with like, oh, I really want to capture, or I should say film started because this rich guy wanted to see if during a horse's gallop, if all four of his hooves came off the ground at one time. Like, it had nothing to do with really being imaginative, but then everybody who saw what the camera could do at that point took it to these extreme levels, and they had to experiment with it, and they had to like go outside of the norm to get everything to where it's at today. Like, it's just like if you actually like look back on where the birth of some of these mediums are formed, they might not have started with imagination, but people sure as hell took it there because they could at that point. You know what I mean? It was just like the possibilities are endless. And still to this day, even with it being so developed, there's still so much out there that you can do, but nobody's going to be able to do it or build off of it if you don't do it. Right? If you don't
That's
use
true.
your imagination and you don't take it to that level, not everybody's going to love it. That's where all the, the critics come into play. And sometimes that's really scary. But at the same time, if you don't do it, people can't build off of what you do and use their imagination to take it to the next level, So it's like this really cool chain of events. If you just utilize what you can dream up, execute it, get it out, and see where it goes.
Sheesh, you made a really, really good point about building off of other people and people building off of you, but you have to create first. As I think that's what kept me stuck for the longest. I've had my times where I've been more stuck than other times,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, to me, that always feels like death. Like what people call writer's block or creative block is death to me. It just feels like I'm dying.
Sure.
And I've just gotten into a habit of just producing, even if I don't like it, or even if it's something small, like I just doodle on a piece of paper. I think that's helped me. But now, at this point in my life, I just create and I don't think about things too much. I just make it and keep going. And I feed off of other people more, and not even just other people, but I'm really aware of what inspires me now. Do you know what Thrasher is? The skating magazine?
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, that really, really inspires me.
Sure.
I don't even skate, but I love looking at that magazine. There's so much art in there. There's so much people who are not scared to be themselves. So
Yeah.
much abstract art and just crazy messages in there that it just always strikes me. It just always inspires me. So I try to put myself into more of those situations, reading the magazine as often as I can, or even going to a skate park and seeing people skating helps me. I think, and this is a little off topic, but I think as far as creative block, if we're more deliberate and aware of what inspires us and we put ourselves in those positions more, we won't have to deal with creative block as much, and we'll create more, and the people around us will be more inspired as well. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I think that creative block, while I still go through it a lot, I have to kind of think about it in this way. It's just me limiting myself, right? Creative block is just because something's not coming to you doesn't mean that you can't be consistently creating. It doesn't have to be the most spectacular thing, or it doesn't have to be this idea that you've had that you just can't get together. It's just like, just continuously do it. Like, oh, well, the cat is sitting in the window right now. Well, what's stopping me from picking up my camera? And it's not the most, thrilling of images, but you're still taking images, and then, it's just like constantly going. It's just, I think that that's what's super helpful. And I love that you said that looking at Thrasher magazines has inspired you over the years, because I think that a lot of magazines have also helped me stay inspired over the years. It's another thing also, even though you're not shooting constantly, like if you're constantly looking at images and stuff, your brain is constantly focused on being creative. Like, so your mental blocks might not actually be mental blocks as long as you're still thinking about the medium, and still thinking about other people's work, because it's everybody's kind of bouncing off each other. While I still have a hard time with competition sometimes, I think I'm a lot more conscious about it now than I ever was, and I'm able to talk myself off a ledge sometimes. But it's like, instead of thinking of other artists as competition, utilize them as a tool, as as I want to be a tool for other people. I want other people to be inspired by my work. Like, I shouldn't be deterred by other people's work who might be doing what I want to do, but better. I should be utilizing what they do and like learning how they're doing it, and then do it in my own way, not copying, of course, but being inspired by that. And that's just the nature of art anyways. And just accepting that and flowing with it is just, it's going to keep you going.
I think the business world rubs off on the creative world, and it creates a sense of competition that innately, I would argue, innately isn't there. Like, creativity is
Yes.
way different than business. You know, Coke and Pepsi are, you know, competing with a similar target audience. But two creatives, two painters aren't necessarily, you know, creating for the same target audience. Or, you know, someone can buy both paintings, or, you know, it's a different process. It's not necessarily we're buying this product. It's not all about the money or the I don't know why the words are escaping me. This it's your fault. It's your fault. No. But it's not necessarily, it's not a business model. Creativity is not a business model. And I feel like when we try to make creativity a business, we almost lose the, for lack of a better term, the innocence of it, the freeness of it, and it becomes very restrained. It becomes less fulfilling, less, again, for lack of a better term, spiritful, less purposeful, and it becomes more task oriented or out of obligation or for money. I feel like it really loses the touch there. And I know you spoke about competition. For me, I used to feel very competitive and almost threatened when it came to other people's work and seeing other people's work. And now what I've learned to do is to either tune it out, like not put myself in certain situations in which I know I'll feel that, or I go in the same mindset that you mentioned, which is seeing people as more so either an inspiration or someone you can collaborate with. I feel like that's really helped me.
Oh my God, I love that you bring that up, because I also want to bring up another point. You are so right. The business aspect of it is kind of what sucks the fun out of everything, right? And then you feel like you're stuck because it does become a competition, because then it's like, well, you know, you want to be making money as well as, you know, you want to encourage others to do the same, but it's not always that easy. And here's the other thing, is that a lot of what I've learned, and a lot of like the leveling up that I've done as an artist in general, is understanding more than just the art. So it's understanding the business aspect of it. If you're feeling threatened, you know, either financially or in like that realm, the business realm of it, then what you should do as an artist is understand business. You don't have to understand, like, you don't have to go to business school or take a business class necessarily, but if you understand what business is and like what marketing is, there are some creative marketing books out there that would be beneficial to you, because at that point you can flip it. So instead of feeling threatened by other people in that realm, you can understand it enough to utilize it and lift others up to help them do the same, because it doesn't have to be threatening. It doesn't have to be competition if you understand what marketing is, and what the business side of it is, right? So there's a lot of really cool creative books out there that have to do with the business of art, that once you understand what they are, it's just less intimidating. And you, instead of feeling small, you feel kind of lifted up, and then you can lift others up who might not understand it, you know, and you can work together in that.
You put that perfectly. You take that feeling of hopelessness and you become empowered by it. That's transmutation. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Accepting the challenge. If you're feeling stuck, it's like instead of wallowing in that, which is something that I do quite often, it's just being conscious of like, okay, why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling so small right now? Why am I feeling like this is a competition? It's because I don't understand it necessarily. So let me understand it, at least enough to get me out of this feeling, right? So,
right.
I don't know.
Wow. So we have just about 10 minutes left, and I have a crap load of questions to ask you. So, like, a crap load.
Is there going to be a part 2? I hope so.
Okay. Yeah, there'll definitely be a part 2. So what I'm doing with this podcast is, in order for me to build momentum and stay encouraged, is dropping it in what I like to call seasons, kind of like a TV show. So you got like
I
three
love
to
it. I love it.
6 to 8 episodes each season, and one will be in fall, and then I'll start the other one sometime in the winter time.
So cool.
So definitely, you'll definitely be on part 2 because there's so much to explore here.
Oh, there really is.
Um,
I could talk about this stuff all day.
let's bring it back to the birth of. For
Yes.
me, that was very vulnerable because, and people don't know this, and it's not so apparent based off of the actual work, but it was about my ex and our relationship and how I felt at the beginning and how I felt at the end when it ended. And there's levels of vulnerability that I purposely and actively wanted to pursue. I wanted to tell a story using photography and video in a way that I felt like I've never done before. And that took a lot of vulnerability, but at the same time, for whatever reason, I felt like it was easy to do because I just really wanted to put some blood on my face. So that encouraged me to do it.
Yes.
And it was the first time I actually planned something. It was the first time I planned to shoot in detail. It's the first time I reached out to someone, you, and was like, hey, I have this idea. It felt like the first time I did project management.
Yes.
So it was more than just the actual shoot. So it really took my mind off the vulnerability part. But now that I think about it, and now that I'm reflecting, it was a very vulnerable thing to do. And in the past, being vulnerable, even now, being vulnerable is still uncomfortable.
Sure.
It's still
I mean, that's
uncomfortable.
part of vulnerability, right?
Yeah, is that discomfort. How do you make yourself vulnerable in your work? And how does it feel?
First, I'm going to start with saying that you did amazing. Like, that is not an easy thing to do. Like, execute an idea from start to finish. And you also gave me director credit when you should have given yourself director credit. I just want to add that in there too, because all you. I had like one idea and all of that. But seriously, like, you need to give yourself more credit for all of that, because that is a huge thing. You did amazing. And I'm so grateful that you called me up to be a part of it. It was so cool. And I needed that at that time, because it had been a while since I, before I jumped in. But to answer your question, I think that vulnerability is, like you said, very uncomfortable and very difficult to just dive into, and just let happen, because you want to control it, like you want yourself as an artist to be a specific thing, and sometimes it's just not always that way. Or if you're trying to get out a very sensitive message, it's a scary thing. It's very scary, and anybody who dives into that should really give themselves a lot of credit, because it's not an easy thing to do. Personally, I do struggle with this a lot, and I notice more recently, and I'm actually trying to work through it by controlling it, of course, is I'll have an idea for a shoot, and it'll be outside of the norm, and I feel very vulnerable, because it will be such a big piece of me, and showing people that piece of me is the scariest part. But there's also this really awesome release that you get after it, and it's like, okay, well, it wasn't so scary. It was just this thing in my mind that I made to be scary. So it's just a matter of, for me, just getting it out there and just doing it. Like, it doesn't matter. It could be this huge thing for you, and then other people are like so underwhelmed because they're just like, oh, it's just Holly showing her work again. But then it's like this huge part of you, right? So it's like scary. It's like, how are people going to react to this? And what are people going to say? And sometimes they're like, this is amazing, and it makes you feel so good. And other people are just like, okay. And it's like, oh no. But either way, putting it out there, to kind of link this back to what we were talking about before, is going to help other artists bridge on that, like add to it. and be vulnerable themselves, because sometimes people will be like, oh, this is a part of Holly that I know she doesn't tell people. So you'll have that support, and no matter what, you're going to have people not like what you do, and you're going to have people like really support what you do. And I think that sometimes you can really touch other people's lives by being your most vulnerable, because it's a part of them that they're really scared to let out into the world too. And when they see, I know this is what inspires me to be vulnerable, is seeing other people be vulnerable themselves, and it kind of inspires me to do the same and to kind of be fearless in that sense. But either way, it just getting it off of your chest, getting it out of your head, and documenting this part of your life. And whether it's scary or exciting or whatever, it's really cool to look back on and be like, I did that, and I was so scared to do that, and now look where I'm at because I did that. I don't know if that answers your question. Man, I'm really bad at answering your question.
And she wants a part 2. No.
But it's being your sincere self and accepting that and allowing others to see that, because it inspires others and may piss off others, but you're doing it and you're being your most sincere self. And it's just important to just be that, no matter how you want to execute it, no matter how you want to show it. I mean, as long as you're not hurting anybody in the process, or trying not to hurt anybody in the process, because a lot of people do get very triggered. They get very offended, and I don't think that it's always the artist's intent to do so. So then it's also taking responsibility for some certain things, and just saying, I'm sorry that that is what triggered you. This was more of a release for me. Like, what I'm doing is not for everybody, but it could be the world to some people too. So it's letting go of some of those things, like you're not trying to hurt anybody, and you're not really trying to impress anybody either. It's just being yourself. Just be yourself. Just do yourself, and do you, because it helps. It helps other people. It's helped me. You being you has helped me. So it's like, it helps me feel more comfortable being myself too. And that's important. Did I answer your question? I hope so.
No, that definitely did. Because vulnerability is kind of like imagination, when we were talking about earlier. It's one of those subjects that you could really spend hours talking about. And in a creative sense, you can spend hours talking about it as well. There's so many different aspects to it. I'd say being vulnerable in my work personally was difficult, because I had to deal with those thoughts, like you mentioned, of how people are going to perceive this, and what are people going to say to me when, I post something on Instagram and I show up to school the next day. What are people going to say? Because I know they're going to see it. So what are they going to say to me about it? Are they going to make fun of me about it? And I think that's a very, and not to downplay it, but a very high school mindset, because a high school mindset is like a real thing. You can tell the people who have a high school mindset.
Sure.
Where they think about, or they, they just speak on everybody but themselves. And there are people like that in the world. But one of the things that helped me was I had to remind myself who I was doing it for.
Yes.
And
100%.
Remind myself of where the satisfaction comes from.
Yes.
And I had to question that. Like, how do I know if I'm satisfied with my work? And that's a whole question we could talk hours about as well, because it kind of aligns with what makes a photo great, in your opinion. But for me, satisfaction comes from an idea and execution.
Yes.
And for my most vulnerable work, I just do it for myself. If I'm not ready to show the world, I do it for myself. The mindset is to do it for me.
Yeah.
And if I choose to share it, I choose to share it.
And it's not your responsibility on how others perceive what you're doing either. While they might tell you that it is, it's really not, because you did that like that project itself was like for you the way, like you had a specific idea and emotional response that you were getting from it, and somebody else might see those images and think something completely different outside of the realm of relationships, but it's not your responsibility to like other people's perception of your work is not your responsibility, is what I'm trying to say. Sorry.
That's a really, really, really good point, because I had to overcome, and this wasn't even a real fear, but fear of what my parents thought of my work.
Sure.
I don't know why that was a fear, because when I reflected on it now, I really don't care, but that was a real fear. If I make myself too vulnerable, my parents are going to see a different side of their son, and I don't know how I feel about that.
Sure.
And now I don't care.
Yeah. It's kind of like this release, right?
Yeah, now I don't care, and that's because I've practiced it.
Yes.
I've practiced in my own time, I've practiced being vulnerable with my work, so I'm comfortable with it. And when I show it to other people, I don't even think about their opinion anymore, because I've practiced just doing it for me. I practiced just thinking about what I think about it, and not even thinking about what other people think about it. So I think there's an element of practice to it as well. When you train your mind to only focus on, or not even only, but prioritize how you feel about it, how satisfied you are with it, you just naturally tune out all the other voices and the noise in the background. So that's helped me.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you were able to do that and execute it and get to that point, because that's huge. That's amazing.
Yeah, you really, as an artist, and as not even just a creative, but as an artist, as someone who really embraces the lifestyle and you live it, and you're not just someone who does it, but you live it, I feel like you have to deal with a lot of adjusting to the way our world is, because it's not set up for you to just be an artist, and pursue your dreams and your goals wholeheartedly. There's a lot of financial situations that come about, but more importantly, social situations, how people perceive you, how you perceive yourself. Are you comfortable with yourself? Are you comfortable with your goals?
Yes.
Resistance is the perfect word. There's a lot of that, and for me, I had to really reflect on, who am I living my life for? Who am I creating for?
Yes.
There may be people who like my work, but if you get too caught up in the fans or the people who like your work or don't like your work, then you're reactive. You set yourself up for resistance. But if you're doing it for you, it's a natural cycle of you creating, you become satisfied, you create again, you're satisfied. Instead of you create, you listen to other people, they say something you don't like, you're dissatisfied and discouraged, you don't create, you feel bad, you create, you criticized again, and that becomes a loop as well. So I've tried to put myself in a situation where I just naturally tune all that shit out and just do it strictly for me, and whatever comes about it.
Man, it took me, I'm 10 years older than you, essentially, and it took me until like this year to figure that out. So that's huge. That's great. You are 100% right. I had to learn that the very hard way and spend a lot of years miserable, and then realizing like, no, I'm here for me. Like, this is my journey. This is what I want to do. And if I'm not like purposely trying to hurt other people, like their reaction and, their perception of what I'm doing is not my responsibility. And at the end of the day, like, there's nothing you can, like, you need to be your genuine self. I need to be my genuine self, and I'm going to do what I can to not like piss off a bunch of people along the way, but I'm not going to please everybody either. I could be doing everything 100% perfectly and people are still going to be pissed. So why go through all that trouble and all of that stress, right? And not be who I am or censor myself or whatever, like, to an extent, of course, I will always to not hurt anybody, you know, but it's like
Hmm.
at the end of the day, like exactly what you just said, like this is you, this is your journey, and nobody should be stopping you from coming to these realizations, and to be, you know, stopping you from being vulnerable and stopping you from leveling up on your on what you want to be doing, whether that's art or whether that turns into something else one day. Like that's up to you,
That's true.
not anybody else.
That's true. By the way, for the people who don't know and haven't seen Holly, she looks like she's probably 5 years younger than me. I just had to mention that. I forget that until you say it every time. Every time you're like, I am a little bit older than you. I'm like, you are. You did say that. You did say
Yeah.
that. I just forget that every time. But that's a great point. That's a great point. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing it for yourself. And I feel like even you, if you're there, you're there. And I think that's a huge step as an artist, as a creative. Once you hit that point, nothing external can stop you.
Yes. Well, I mean, I still struggle with it, but
Well, I mean,
once you like become conscious of it, and like you can consistently talk yourself off that ledge, yes, it's like nobody can stop me now. You know what I mean? Like, world, watch out. Like, I am gonna give you everything I have, and that's how it should be. That's how it should be. That's how we lift each other up. Like, that's how we build these like strong foundations for other artists to one day, like, you know, build off of what you're doing, whether it's a small group of them or the world. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, yes, we need to have a part two.
We definitely will. We actually went over the time I expected, so I know we're gonna do a part two. My last question for you, and I love to ask this question at the end of each episode. What advice do you have for new or upcoming photographers looking to improve their craft?
Listen to everything that we just said.
Good answer.
Never stop learning. Never, ever, ever stop learning. Don't get comfortable. Once you find yourself comfortable, okay, hang there for a second and then move out of that and push yourself to do more. Once you pick up a camera and start shooting around, well, okay, then learn the basics of composition and lighting and mood and then storytelling. And then once you got that down, learn about the history of it and learn where it came from and why it started and how it started and when it was used and why it was used. And then from there, it's just like never stop learning. There's so much cool stuff out there and it's always going to be so inspiring. Never stop doing it. Never stop being vulnerable, and be consistent, because if you're not consistent, then you're going to hold yourself back.
Right. Right. That's a perfect point. Once you stop, it takes energy to get back sometimes. And sometimes life doesn't allow you to, because I forgot what the quote was, but it's something along the lines of, if you are not I'm about to butcher it so bad.
Butcher it. Look at the idea.
Okay, it's like, if you're not living for yourself, you're gonna live for someone else.
Yeah.
If you're not using your time, somebody else is gonna use your time.
Yes. So. Unless that's your thing and you're okay with that.
Yeah.
But if you're not, don't do that. You don't have to do that.
I'm glad you said that. Unless it's your thing.
Because who am I to say? Some people are just like that, some people are just like totally content, riding the tail of somebody else. But if you're not like that, you don't have to be like that.
Right. Don't set yourself up for that.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna do a part 2 for sure.
Yes.
I'm gonna get back to you. Because I'm looking at the questions right now, and there was a crap load I didn't even ask because I ad-libbed so many. So we're for sure gonna do a part 2.
Yes.
But this is The Artist Path. Thank you, Holly, for joining. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for being my creative partner.
Oh my God. Thank you, Flynn. Seriously.
When we gonna do the next shoot?
Oh my god, so soon. Oh my god, I can't even tell you how many ideas I have come like in my head right now, and I've been deprived of shooting. Flynn, this is seriously, you're gonna be hiding from me by the end of the year because I'm like,
Oh
okay,
gosh.
let's do
Oh gosh. I haven't even picked up my camera in a while, so I'm ready.
it.
I'm
Perfect.
ready for whatever. But we'll talk after this. We'll talk.
Yes.
Thank y'all again, and we're out.
Thank you, Flynn.